Hello everybody and welcome to another reaction video, and today we're going to be looking at a band called D. Band I've not heard of before, so obviously I had to do a little bit of research. And D is a Japanese visual kei metal band from formed in 2003 by Asagi, Rizuha and Sin after their previous band Syndrome disbanded. Now I think I've heard of Syndrome before, but I'm not sure. D's music includes heavy guitar songs as well as melancholic ballads, and even includes medieval music and folk dance from around the world. Their lyrics tend to focus on love, human nature, and some esoteric themes such as spirituality and the relationship between persons and nature, and the costumes that they wear in their music videos closely relate to the stories that they tell. Now, I am familiar with visual kei. I do actually own several visual kei bands in my music collection, such as Malice Miser, possibly one of the most famous Japanese metal bands around, along with Diran Grey, another very, very famous Japanese band, although saying that they used to be visual kei, they sort of steered away from that in their later in their career, and other bands such as Vidal as well. So I am familiar with visual kei. It's nothing new to me. Now, the track that I'm going to look at is called Ouka Saki Some ni Keri, roughly translating to blooming of the cherry blossom becoming stained. There you go. Now, the cherry blossom is something that is quite prominent in Japanese culture. The cherry blossom itself and the relevance of it goes back hundreds and thousands of years. The cherry blossom itself represents the fragility and beauty of life. It's a reminder that, for the most part, life is almost overwhelmingly beautiful, but is also very fragile and tragically short. So, you know, there is quite a bit of significance in the name of the title of the song already. But having not heard of this band before, I kind of know what to expect, but I'm not entirely sure. So we'll get straight to it, I think, and yeah, see where this goes. So, Ouka Saki Some ni Keri by D.
がワクワク
Right, well, so it is pretty much what I expected. It's pretty much staple for the style of the music. You know, the visual kei. A lot of these bands tend to sound quite similar, although this band, I must say, out of all the visual kei that I've ever actually heard, it's not that spectacular, to be honest. It's a little bit dull, actually. But anyway, the song itself, as I said, Blooming of the Cherry Blossom Becoming Stained. The lyrics themselves, I've got the English translation here, thankfully, and they're pretty much... It's an interesting way of looking at it. They've gone... The song opens with, "Even if others fail to remember, I will never forget the dawning twilight of spring. The crimson-stained earth, the weeping rain, will those colours fade away? Even as the flowers bloom, my body cannot overcome those tears of sadness. Every night, reminiscing the deceased, the mark that appears after all have forgotten my colour. If my wish could be fulfilled under a cherry blossom tree in spring, I wish to join the deceased. Even as I think so, the existence of sadness in the world remains. Even if others do not know of these shattered feelings, will they still know of the cherry blossom tree?" So, the actual title there, "Blooming of the Cherry Blossom Becoming Stained," seems to be suggestive of the cycle of life, as it were. So, like, the blooming of the cherry blossom, you know, being the beginning of life, and being stained, I'm assuming he's talking about as the cherry blossom flowers die, so representing the death of whomever. And the lyrics even seem to suggest as such as well. I mean, there was a line there, "I will never forget the dawning twilight of spring." So it sounds like it makes no sense, the dawning twilight, but that's like the onset of the end, essentially. You know, the beginning of the moment where something begins to die, as it were. And then he mentions, like, the crimson-stained earth and the weeping rain, will those colours fade away? So obviously, you know, talking about, you know, as they die, decay, the colours disappear and basically fade away into the earth. Thus also suggesting the way that life sort of slowly fades away as well. It goes, "Even as the flowers bloom, my body cannot overcome those tears of sadness. Every night reminiscing the deceased, the mark that appears after all have forgotten my colour." So again, even as new life begins, I can't help but think about those that have died, those that have passed on, you know, remembering them fondly. So, you know, carries on with, "If my wish be fulfilled under a cherry blossom tree in spring, I wish to join the deceased. Even as I think so, the existence of sadness in the world remains. Even if others do not know of these shattered feelings, will they know of the cherry blossom tree?" So it's like, if my wish could be fulfilled under the cherry blossom tree in spring, I wish to join the deceased. So it's like wanting to join his ancestors, you know, wanting to be with the people that he loves that have passed on. Just at a rough guess, that's what it seems to be talking about. And it says, the existence of sadness in the world remains, even if others do not know of these shattered feelings. So obviously, he's still mourning the loss of these loved ones, even if he doesn't tell anybody about it or show it to anybody. So that's what it seems to be talking about. And it's quite beautifully written, you know, very nicely worded, and, you know, a very interesting way to talk about, you know, the time between life and death and the occurrence of excuse me, the final transition, as it were. So it's an interesting song with an interesting meaning. So far, fairly interesting. We'll carry on. Well, there we go. That was Ouka Saki Some ni Keri by D. A very interesting song, as I said, with the way that it was worded. When it came back in, it went back to a previous verse where it says, "Even as the flowers bloom, my body cannot overcome the tears of sadness every night, remembering the deceased. The mark that appears, after all have forgotten my colour." And then it says, "Countless had left this world during the fighting. Will I ever meet them again?" Excuse me. Like the traces of the rainbow, the things that disappear are those precious memories. And then, even if others do not know of these shattered feelings, will they know of the cherry blossom tree? So the final verse there, saying countless have left this world during the fighting. So possibly he's talking about, the deaths of soldiers, maybe. Or people who have been victims of war, like innocent victims. And he's like, will I ever meet them again? So again, wanting to know if he will ever encounter his ancestors in the afterlife. And then, like traces of the rainbow, the things that disappear are those precious memories. Now, I think that's a lovely couple of lines. Because obviously rainbows fade out of existence and they take with them this brilliant and beautiful colour. And it's like saying that the people of this world that pass on are a brilliant, bright force in the world, and when they die, that colour is taken away from the world and the world becomes a dimmer, less beautiful place for that loss. So, it's a very interesting imagery used in the lyrics of the song. And it's a nice meaning. And once again, we seem to be continuing this trend of listening to some foreign bands which are using non-typical instruments, because in the background of that song, pretty much throughout the whole thing, you could hear some of the sort of traditional Japanese instruments. I don't know the name of any of them, but they were definitely there, like similar to the fiddle that was used in the chthonic video yesterday, and the horsehead fiddle used in the Mongolian videos. You know, there was that one there. There was that thing that was very similar to also that tabletop plot instrument that was used at the beginning of the chthonic video from yesterday. So once again, we seem to have ended up with another band with non-traditional instruments, which again I find really fascinating, the way they merge the two kinds of music together. You know, because as I said yesterday, on paper it shouldn't work, but somehow it does. Now, as I said before, this particular visual kei band doesn't really quite hit the spot for me. You know, it's just something pretty much non-spectacular about the actual song itself. I mean, don't get me wrong, all 5 of the guys, very, very talented, and yes, they are all guys. You know, all 5 of them very talented, you know, musically, very talented, very capable, and obviously they've been going since 2003 and still going, so they're doing well and doing something right. And for all you know, there must be people out there who think that they are a great band. It's just, for me, out of all the visual kei bands, they're not the best I've heard, but still pretty decent. So yeah, I wouldn't object to listen to them. But then, of course, as I've always said, I'm not going to form an overall opinion of a band just off one song. So I will have to hear something else by them as well to get a more rounded idea of what they're like. Because as I've always said, you know, this song might be the outlier. This might not be their best track. It might not be the best example of their work. So I will have to revisit them again at some point. But I mean, for the most part, it was pretty decent. You know, I wouldn't object to listening to it. I would quite happily sit down and have that on. Well, yeah, can't really think of much else to say about it, so I will leave that as it is. Now, if anybody would like to suggest a track for me to react to, then please do so by all means. You can drop a comment in the comment section below, or message me on my Facebook or Instagram. The links for those are in the description down there. Just do know, if you do suggest a track, it will take me a while to get around to it, as I do get suggested dozens of tracks every single day, so my list grows faster than I can record the videos. But I do write down every suggestion I get given, so it will get done at some point. It will just take me a while to get around to it. Unless, of course, the song you've suggested is something that someone else has suggested a while back, in which case it might not take as long. But feel free to give me any suggestions. I don't care what kind of music it is. I like all styles. Also, Metalhead Reacts is a proud supporter of the Sophie Lancaster Foundation. They are a British-based charity whose main goal is to put an end to hate crimes. Something I think that is really important and needs a lot more attention brought to it. Because every day we hear of these of hate crimes in social media, on the news, you know, in the papers and stuff like that. You know, we hear about racism every day. We hear about like homophobia, transphobia, religious hatred. We hear about these every single day, but we very rarely, if ever, hear about the people that are getting physically attacked purely for their taste in music and style of clothing. You know, people are getting beaten quite severely just because they like alternative music or wear alternative clothing, and it's unacceptable. You know, you don't beat someone up because they like different books to you. You don't beat someone up because they like different movies to you. So why should it be acceptable to beat someone up because they like different music to you? You know, it doesn't affect your life in any way. So, you know, what's the point? If you don't like the clothes that someone's wearing, there are infinite other directions you can look in. Shift your gaze to the side of a centimetre or so, and you won't be looking at them. It's simple as that. You know, but for some reason, these people feel the need to physically attack these people, to verbally assault these people, just because they don't like it. And it's unacceptable, you know. You don't see metalheads walking down the street lynching people for listening to Ariana Grande and Wiz Khalifa, do you? You very rarely, if ever, hear that. I mean, I'm not saying it never happens. It may well happen. But for the most part, it's these people that listen to normal music, the everyday sort of chart music and stuff like that. They feel the need to shout insults or physically attack people who listen to alternative music and dress in alternative fashion. And it's ridiculous. I mean, the Sophie Lancaster Foundation was brought into being because their daughter, Sophie Lancaster, was beaten to death. She was killed by a group of youths purely because of the way she dressed and the music she listened to. They didn't even know this girl. They had no idea who she was. And she was one of the nicest people in the world, and she would talk to anybody. Earlier in the day, she was talking to a group of youths similar to the group that attacked her. They were of a similar musical taste. They liked chart music or hip-hop and what have you. She was talking to them, having a laugh, having a good time. But on the way home, this group, she was walking through the park with her boyfriend, and this group of youths who didn't know her from Adam, just because of the way she looked, decided that it was okay to attack her because they didn't like what clothes she was wearing or the music that they listened to and stood for. Now, thankfully, her boyfriend got away. He was badly beaten, but he got away with his life. Well, I say got away. He survived, should I say. He didn't actually escape. But he was left on the ground with Sophie, but he survived. And unfortunately, she died from her injuries. And it's unacceptable that, this girl lost her life because a group of people couldn't accept the fact that she liked something different to them. I mean, how do you get to the mindset where you think that it's okay to beat someone to death? I mean, that might not have been their intention, but it's still nonetheless what they did. Where do you get to the mindset where you think it's okay to physically attack someone because of their taste in music? It makes no sense. And it's something that needs more attention because it happens every day. For most of my life, I was physically attacked, bullied, beaten, I was spit on, had things thrown at me, I was shoved around because of the music that I listened to, because of the way that I dressed. And I know it's happened to many of my friends as well, and even some of you watching. And when it comes to the point when someone is actually killed because of this, it's gone too far. It should never have gone that far. It should never get to the point where someone is murdered because they like different music. You don't see people who listen to opera and classical music beating up people who listen to chart music, do you? That people say that heavy metal, encourages violence. It doesn't. If anything, the hip-hop culture is more violent. I mean, you hear about all these, gun attacks and knife attacks that go on in a lot of countries. 9 times out of 10, these drive-by shootings are done by the hip-hop culture. They're the people that tend to carry around guns and stuff like that. I mean, I'm not saying that some people in the heavy metal culture aren't, to blame. Obviously people like Varga Ness, guy who stabbed Euronymous in the head with a knife and used to burn down churches. That's happened, but it's not nearly as prevalent in the heavy metal area as people seem to think it is. And I mentioned this a few days ago when I covered a song, and it was all about hope and pushing forward through adversity and stuff like that. We in heavy metal music, I've come across many more of those songs like that than I have about violence and devil worship, which is what everybody seems to think heavy metal's about, which it isn't. But you don't hear very many positive songs in pop and hip hop. I mean, Eminem even covered it when he did a track called Toy Soldiers. He was talking about the gun and knife violence in hip hop and how people are getting shot because they're on different gangs and stuff like that. And that sort of thing's even covered in the film 8 Mile as well, which I think is a great film. I'm getting off topic now, but it's anyway. violence in music it's stupid, because music is one of those all-encompassing things that brings people together. People look at me and go, he's a metalhead. Yes, I'm a metalhead. I listen to heavy metal music, but I also listen to many other styles of music. I listen to classical music. I listen to opera. I do listen to some pop music. I do listen to hip-hop. I primarily listen to heavy metal, yes, but that is not everything. You can take a look at me, people take a look at me and go, oh, he's a goth, which I'm not. And they can never pronounce goth properly either, it's always goth with an F. But anyway, people make these snap judgments just based on how I'm dressed and, the music that they associate with it. And it's wrong. It needs to stop. And violence against people who listen to this style of music needs to stop as well. Because it happens every single day and just goes unmentioned, unreported, and people are getting significantly hurt, and it needs to stop. And this is the sort of thing that the Sophie Lancaster Foundation wants to stop. Because nobody should have to lose their life because of the taste in music that they have. It's stupid. If you'd like to find out more about the Sophie Lancaster Foundation, there is a link to the website in the description below. You can go over there, find out what they're doing at the moment, what their goal is, because they can explain it without going off on random rants and tangents like I do. And if you can help them in any way, that would be fantastic. Even something as simple as one of these Sophie wristbands. Every little bit helps. It all matters, and it all makes a difference towards putting an end to all of this. And eventually, if we get enough support behind it, if we get enough attention brought to it, we will be able to stamp out prejudice, hatred and intolerance everywhere. But I'm going to leave that as it is for the time being. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.
내가 왔으면